right, brothers and sisters of sobriety, we are back with Tenacious Recovery. You got to be tenacious about your recovery if you want to stay sober. So my name is Vinny. I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
I'm Sam. I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
Thank you, Sam. Good to see you again.
Likewise, brother.
This is our podcast, Tenacious Recovery. We are a traveling podcast, and we're coming in today from Westchester, Pennsylvania. And I can't tell you how happy I am to have the next guest on. Introduce yourself for everybody.
Hi, I'm Christie, and I'm an alcoholic.
Good to see you, Christie. I've known Christie for a little while. She has a very compelling story, and I know our listeners are going to get a lot out of her story. So let's take it all the way back. I like to kind of start at the beginning. If I want you to feel comfortable. Tell me as much as you tell the crowd as much as you want. When did it all start?
So I grew up with a pretty normal household, mom and dad, younger brother. I now know that a lot of people in the program feel the same way I did. I always kind of felt like that I don't belong and I didn't know why feeling. But I also know that I really liked the taste of alcohol from a pretty young age. My mom told me a story where my cousin and I think we're 5 or 6, and big Irish, Italian, Catholic family. Everybody's got their floater drinks on the tables. And my cousin and I took them all under a tree and drank them. And that sounds about right for me. And I probably did drink floaters up until I was 30.
How old were you then?
5 or 6 when I first tasted alcohol.
Wow.
I was always stealing sips of beer and stuff like that. But the first drunk I ever had that I clearly remember where I didn't black out, I was about 13. And it was one of those, you mix all the alcohol in your parents' basement so you think it tastes better. You mix it with some soda, tastes like shit, and you drink it anyway. And it was me and 2 other friends, and I loved it. I loved it. I loved the feeling. I didn't feel sick. I felt silly and happy, and my friend was puking in the sink, and the other one passed out, and I was still raring to go, and I didn't know why they reacted differently than I did. I was just like, this is the best thing ever. And from 13 to like 15, I kind of snuck in alcohol wherever I could, started smoking pot around 15. But around 15 years old was when I really started my blackout drinking, and I never stopped blacking out when I drank.
Did you drink alone when you were young?
Yes. But not to the point of getting drunk. It was more like, could I get away with it?
Right.
Where did you actually grow up?
I grew up in Westchester, about 15 minutes from here. I was born in New Jersey, in Williamstown, New Jersey. And we moved to Westchester when I was 4. My parents have stayed here my whole life. I moved a couple times, geographical relocation for an alcoholic works well. So I did that a couple times, but wherever I went, there I took myself. So I always ended up coming home, and it's a nice place to live. My parents are 10 minutes away, and here's where I stay for now. Cool.
Outstanding. So let's go back to that 13-year-old little girl. How did you acquire alcohol at the time?
It was in my parents' basement.
So you just took it from them?
Yeah,
like
it wasn't locked up.
A lot of other kids do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just take it from them.
It wasn't locked up. I mean, my parents didn't think I was going to do that. And I liked that they didn't think I was going to do that. So it wasn't hard. They're not big drinkers. So it wasn't hard to take a bunch of stuff from bottles and make it look like something was still in there. Later I would water stuff down, but I learned that gets you caught. Right. So I tried not to water stuff down because, absolute water and stuff down gets you caught.
The freezer will really get you on
that one. Yes, absolutely.
The freezer will rat you out.
Yep, the vodka freezes if there's water in there.
Correct.
Yep.
That's hilarious. Oh, my God.
I think all of us did that at some point.
Definitely.
But I always had that I want to feel different feeling. And the alcohol gave me that.
Do you ever think back, because I know you've been sober for quite a while now, did you ever think back on, like, was there a reason? Was there, there's something in the program, or, you know, in addiction prevention, it's called a precipitating factor. Like, do you ever wonder what your precipitating factor, like, why do I drink?
There's a few of them now that I've been sober for a long time. First, when I was 13, my mom's mom passed away, my grandmom. And we were very, very close. She was young. She was only 61. She died of cancer. It was very, very hard for me. My mom was very young. She was only 36 when her mom died. And my mom is the oldest girl of 7 kids. And like I said, an Irish Catholic family. So my mom took over for her dad and for siblings. And I was just so sad. And now, as an adult, later I found out I have clinical depression, and also had some anxiety. And in the early 90s, this was 1991 when Grandma passed away, people didn't talk about depression and anxiety. It wasn't something that was discussed. It was something to be shoved under the rug, especially in a family that was like mine. You don't talk about the way you feel. This is not something that we discuss around other people. But I was always the one that wanted to discuss stuff. So I was always the one pointing out the elephant in the room.
So from an early age, you wanted to almost express that something was wrong with you?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
I would say I don't feel right. I'm sad. I didn't know why. Nobody knew what depression was. Nobody had ever discussed it. But years later, I found out my great-grandmother had such severe depression. She was bedridden. My grandmother had it. My mother was later diagnosed. Many of the women in my family were later diagnosed. But I didn't get diagnosed until I was about 16. And it was because I said, there's something wrong. I need help. And finally, my mom took me to a counselor, and there I got some help for it. But, you know, at 13, a lot of young girls and boys develop depression and anxiety and don't know what it is. And I didn't know what was wrong with me, and the alcohol made it better. So it made it a simple fix.
So it made it to where you weren't feeling depressed anymore.
And I wasn't feeling like I didn't belong. I didn't know why I felt like I didn't belong. I just felt that way. And I still can't explain why I felt that way.
I actually do still feel like I'm always on the outside looking in. But you develop coping skills to kind of deal with that kind of stuff so that you don't have to get drunk or high to actually cope with that kind of a feeling. That's what, I mean, if you look at, you know, AA, the 12 steps, these are things that help us grow as adults and human beings to get back into feeling better.
And I had none of those coping skills as a 13-year-old. I didn't. I figured out that alcohol worked, and I took it and I ran.
The only sad part is when we look back on our past, because I do it too, alcohol is a chemical depressant. I have no idea how it helped me, but when I drank it, I felt great.
Me too.
I no longer felt depressed. I no longer felt that sense of anxiety. And I'm sure with how you're describing it, you're kind of describing it that way too.
If you ever listen to Joe and Charlie's tapes, and I'm a huge fan of Joe and Charlie, and if any of your listeners haven't listened to them, please do. They break down the chemical reaction of an alcoholic in their doctor's opinion explanation that is so poignant, and it helped me understand why my body and my brain react differently. It is an upper for me. It is a chemical depressant, but my body was already depressed. So this gave me something that made me feel better. But it only made me feel better in the moment. The next day, the depression was 10 times worse. The anxiety was 100 times worse. And then it came along with guilt and shame and, oh my gosh, what did I do? And so our bodies as alcoholics and addicts do not react like other people. We don't have that same reaction. We can't.
Yeah, you know, the next day, like you said, it kicks in. The chemical depressant actually does finally kick in the next day.
Right.
Because alcohol stays in your brain. I mean, it leaves your system pretty quickly, but it actually has ill effects on your brain up to 8 days later. It's poison, basically, for your brain. But the chemical depressant kicks in the next day. But I'm with you on that, that Friday night, Saturday night. It just feels great. It just works the opposite in the alcoholic brain. You're right.
I always used to say that it would fill a void that it continued to also help grow.
Yes.
You know?
Exactly.
And the more of it would fill it, then it would get larger.
Well, we hear in AA, it was that God-shaped hole. I'm the hole in the donut, and I didn't know what to fill it with. So I filled it with alcohol, and I filled it with men, and I filled it with just shit. And then years into sobriety, I realized, wow, that was not the right thing to do.
Right.
I had no coping skills because I didn't learn them. I stopped. I mean, literally, alcohol is poison to the brain. And when you start drinking or using at such a young age, you're going to stunt the growth of your brain. So your 100%. Brain is not going to grow up like a person that isn't using like I chose to use.
You basically hit the pause button.
Yes.
And you just basically stop growing, mentally. I've felt that too.
When I talk to people in sobriety about how our brains are different and when we start using versus when we get sober, I said, I started really blackout drinking at 15 years old and I got sober at 30. So right now, my brain is 29. My body is not 29, but I feel 29.
You look 29.
I really like Sam for that one. I appreciate that. Can you
Sam,
tell my daughters?
You can definitely play for 29.
Yeah, tell my
Sam's
daughters.
good.
They said, Mommy, you're old, Mom. Yeah, well.
So moving forward, where are we up to? About like age 15, 16. I feel like a lot of the time when I talk to alcoholics of all walks, right? There's this window where we exist up until our friends, our peers, start kind of doing the same thing. And it's not the same thing, but we justify it as the same thing. Like keg parties in the woods, things such as that. Talk to me about that. I mean, I'm more interested in the window before because that's like the interesting part. To me, that classifies alcoholism inside somebody. When you're like 11 to 14, don't know why you feel this way, in your parents' basement, drinking Beefeater, which at that time is disgusting.
Sapphire gin.
Horrible gin.
You're classy. You're classy for the Sapphire gin.
Yeah. That my dad had the classy bar. Always did. And he's still normal. Still don't understand it.
What did the second half of high school and college look like
For high school, I was the weekend warrior. I got good grades. I was in theater. I was active. Was never good at sports ever. Still do not understand them. That's not my mind is very artistic. I loved theater. I loved to sing.
Sports ain't for everybody.
It definitely was not for me. But I was a weekend warrior, and 15, 16, I got a boyfriend. He was older than me. He had easier access to alcohol. Every weekend I got drunk. Every time I drank, I blacked out. And I never told anybody. I never said to anyone that I blacked out because deep down in my soul, I knew it wasn't normal. But I never wanted anyone to know that the way I drank wasn't normal. I never even told anyone I blacked out until I got sober, until I was over 30 years old. I kept it to myself because it was one of my largest sources of shame. So I did well in high school. I graduated. I went to Westchester University. I did the same thing. I got a roommate my freshman year, and her boyfriend was a dealer. He dealt weed. So I was like, this is awesome. We got drunk all the time. We got high all the time. But none of my classes started until noon. So, and I thought the university was actually doing me a favor. Like, that's the way they scheduled me. And my roommate had classes at 8 a.m. and she was on, academic probation by the end of the first year. And she said to me, it's not fair that you got classes later in the day. And I was like, I literally thought the university just did this for me to be able to have fun. But it was just because I was a communication studies major and that's when the classes were. So, it worked out in my favor. But I blacked out every time I drank, pretty much from the time of 15 to the time I got sober. And I would wake up and not know where I was in college. I didn't really do that as often in high school, but I absolutely I didn't drive in high school until I was a senior. But, the boyfriend and the people I hung out with, they were drinking and driving, and I didn't care. Like, you know how you saw those commercials back in the day, The More You Know, and I remember as a child saying I would never drink and drive. I would never do this. And I was the passenger, and it didn't even cross my mind that it wasn't okay.
I love how in sobriety we regularly think back to the things that we did, especially those of us that are parents. And we're like, oh, how could I ever do that? How could I ever walk the streets of North Philadelphia at night, or drink and drive, or dare I say, steal this or do that? Like, horrendous things.
Drink and drive every day.
Yeah. Every
day.
Yep.
And I didn't ever think anything was going to happen to me until it did. And then I did graduate from Westchester University, and like 2 weeks after I graduated, I apparently, I don't remember a lot. I drank all day, got in the car to drive home, and I passed out behind the wheel and hit a tractor trailer. The tractor trailer was going 20. I was going 45. The police officer later told my mom that I had passed a speed trap and I wasn't swerving or anything. There were no skid marks, so I literally just passed out behind the wheel from alcohol. And when they told us later, my blood alcohol was a 0.33, and I was 105 pounds.
Wow.
That's 4 times the legal limit.
Yes, and it's lethal to anyone that is not an alcoholic.
100%.
Absolutely.
Anyone normal, not like us, not like our bodies, would die from that. Just that alone. But I hit the back of a tractor trailer, and my chest hit the steering wheel. My face hit the dashboard. Police, came to the scene. Paramedics had to intubate me on the scene, which anyone that doesn't know that they had to put a breathing tube down my throat because both of my lungs had collapsed. All of my ribs were broken, and I had shattered my face. My eye walls and sockets. I used to speak to schools, and I said, when you think of that part, feel around your eye. There's bones around your eye. Feel all of that. Mine were gone. I didn't have those anymore.
All this was gone?
It was gone.
Oh,
all
wow.
under here was gone. I didn't have my nose anymore. It was gone. My teeth were broken. My jaw was broken. My skull was fractured. I had traumatic brain injury. And then I was taken to a local hospital, Crozier Chester Medical Center. Mm-hmm. They took me there. There was a trauma surgeon that, saved my life, but he was an asshole, and he was nasty to my mom, and, acted like I deserved it. And, now we know so much more about the disease, and we know so much more about how to treat people, but this was also, 23 years ago. And it was a different time, and it doesn't make it right, but it shows how much we've learned. But when the accident happened, my mom was home by herself because my dad was away on business. My little brother was a senior in high school, so he was home, and he had finals the next day. And my mom said there was a knock on the door at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they said, ma'am, your daughter has been in an accident, and we need you to come with us. And they went to the house because they thought I wouldn't survive the ambulance ride to the hospital.
Wow. So
they thought they were going to end up doing a death notification instead of bringing her to the hospital. But my mom, they took her to the hospital. They brought her to the emergency room. They put her in the room where they put people when you're going to get bad news. A social worker met my mom. And then the trauma surgeon came in and told my mom, your daughter was drunk and disorderly, and we had to tie her down. And my mom said, my daughter doesn't drink and drive. And whenever I even hear her say that, it gets me teary and choked up because shit, she really didn't think I was that fucking stupid. How stupid was I? But once I put the drink in my body, I wasn't me anymore. It wasn't my normal brain. It was my alcoholic brain.
Right.
I had no inhibitions. I didn't even think about it. It was automatic. I just did it. And my mom had to wait there for hours by herself to find out if I was going to live or die. And
drunk and disorderly, though, that's
I was going to die.
You were intubated. How could you be disorderly?
Apparently because I had no face. I was fighting them.
Oh, okay.
But I was a trauma nurse for many years, and I'll tell you, every trauma I've ever had fights you because they're frightened. Their body is in full fight or flight mode, and they are frightened.
Gotcha.
And regardless if there's drugs or alcohol on board, you're going to fight a little bit. If alcohol and drugs are involved, they fight a whole lot. Usually, a doctor does not approach a family like that. But I will tell you that she went to the CEO of the hospital, and that doctor did have to apologize to my mother.
No
Good.
way.
You do not mess with my mom.
Good for her.
Yeah, you don't mess with my mom.
You know, some doctors don't have the bedside manner, but the guy saved your life.
And he doesn't.
So there's
Right.
there's an upside to this. The doctor
Absolutely.
wasn't nice, but we're sitting here doing a podcast 23 years later.
Absolutely. And, you know, God works in amazing, mysterious, crazy ways because, no, none of this would have happened if I hadn't been drinking. But if I hadn't been drinking, I would have died on impact because of the way my body hit. And the car was older. There was no airbag. But they told me later if there'd been an airbag, I would have died.
But you would have never hit the truck.
Nope.
So you could say what you want. Without the alcohol, you don't even get in the accident.
Nope.
Forget about not surviving the accident. You wouldn't have gotten in the accident.
But just so happened that like a month before the accident happened, this really great oral maxillofacial surgeon had started with Crozier. They were able to reconstruct my face from my high school graduation picture.
Wow.
It was, like I said, 23 years ago. So that was my first surgery. I have had over 20 since
Wow.
then. I've
20
had
since then?
20 surgeries since then, yeah.
In what time period, if you don't mind me
In
asking?
23 years.
Okay.
Well, no.
Wow.
Okay,
When
so...
was your last one?
My last surgery was... My oldest daughter is 8, so she was 2. So I had... In about 18 years, I had over 20 surgeries.
Can I tell you something? You would have no idea.
Thank you.
Looking at you.
Well, I
that
really
you've
have
had-
some scars and stuff, but...
I would have absolutely no idea looking at you that any of that ever happened.
Thanks.
If that means anything.
It does. It does.
100%.
They did a
no
great
idea.
job.
They
Yeah.
did. It was a lot of surgery, a lot of pain. I had some great surgeons that reconstructed for me, and over the years they learned more things. So now, like, my nose is made out of my rib cartilage, and
Really?
I have ear cartilage in my cheek, and I have all sorts of metal implants in my face, and
Wow.
but you know what's interesting about it is my alcoholism intensified so much after that accident, and none of it would have happened if it hadn't been for my alcoholism. But what's interesting about that accident is that I didn't look at it as a problem with alcohol. I looked at it as I'm 21, I fucked up. I
got
won't
in
do
a car
this again.
accident.
Right.
Yeah, I had an accident. Nobody deserves this. And no, nobody does deserve what I've been through. Nobody does. But I did cause it. And I am fully capable of accepting that that's what I did. That's what my disease drove me to. But I got behind the wheel of the car. I did that. I hear a lot of people in the rooms over the more recent years say, oh, that wasn't me. But it was me. It was absolutely me. It was part of me.
Sure.
I have a disease. And I didn't recognize the disease at the time. Like I said, I was 21. I made a mistake. But I'll tell you, after I got out of the hospital, I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. I had chest tubes. I was in there a long time. And within 6 weeks, I was back out at the bar. And within probably 6 months, I was drinking and driving again.
See, a lot of people that are listening, well, no, most people listening can identify with how you are and what you went through. But a lot of people that aren't in the program and don't know a whole lot about alcoholism and drug addiction, because I got into a life-threatening car accident in 1984, And people say to me, oh, was that when you got clean? And I tell people, no, I drank and did drugs for 19 more months before I finally realized that, okay, now it's time. It's time. And I've been sober ever since. So you basically did what I did. After your accident, you got back on your feet and you started in with your addiction again.
I drank and used for 8 years.
I fell off a 3-story building in West Philadelphia, flat on my face, stood up, had broken my leg, my hip, and 3 of my ribs.
Wow.
Got taken to the Penn Medicine on whatever that is, 59th Street. I was back to work 10 days later, behind the bar.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I was ready to drink. And you know what? I remember going back to the bar thinking I was some sort of fucking celebrity. Like, I survived.
Right.
But I'm here drinking again with the same people that do the same shit I do.
Yep.
And I had just graduated from college, and, you know, all the plans that I had job interviews lined up, all that went down the drain, you know?
Yep.
I got a job, but it was like at a clothing store, and, you know, I
had nothing to do with your major.
No. I had a communication major. I wanted to do public relations, but, you know, I had a pretty jacked up face. And then, like, within 6 months, I met a dude, and he told me I was pretty, and I was not pretty at that time. My face did not look like this. Lots of reconstruction later, I look like this. But he drank like me, and long story short about that relationship, I broke up with him for the way he drank.
Wow.
He drank too much for me.
That's bad.
It was bad. It was bad.
I just think it's so funny when we're at our worst and we judge and take other people's
Yes,
inventory.
absolutely.
We're like, I'll never be like
He
that.
is such a drunk. I'm not like him, except I'm exactly like him.
I got in a life-threatening car accident, but I will never.
Right. Exactly.
I love that logic.
I remember.
Yes!
I love the alcoholic logic.
I remember being in treatment and looking around at all these people that I was with, and I'm like, I'm not like these people. I just drink.
Yeah.
You know, I just drink on the weekends, or I just drink 3 times a week, or whatever it is. These people were doing cocaine and crack had just, like, you know, made a big splash in the U.S. in 1986. Before that, but I mean, it was hitting hard then. But I knew I was not like these people. And
I had a job.
Yeah, we feel the same way about things that go on before we get sober, because we're not like those other people.
That's the ego side of alcoholism. To be honest, I do it in recovery too. I compare myself to other people every single day. Hopefully by the end of the day, I've taken the time to be like, what they're like has nothing to do with you. Stop doing that. Get your ego in check. Maybe get on your knees and say a prayer.
Yep.
But I do it all the time.
But it's that constant daily reprieve that you have to remember that, you know, people that don't have a program don't think about. You know, like, I can look at somebody else, take their inventory, and then be like, oh, you know, that was not okay. Because I don't know what they're going through. I don't know what's happening in their life, and they don't know what's happening in mine. So who am I to judge? Like, God can judge. It's not my place. And, you know, as a parent, I find myself telling my children, you know, when somebody was unkind to you that day, think about what's happening to them. We don't know. So just take a step back and be kind in return, no matter what. What if they're hungry? What if they don't have parents that care about them when they go home? What if they don't have the things they need at home? We don't know. So we need to be kind in return.
Yep.
I say the same thing.
And they
kids.
need to hear that.
Absolutely. So after the accident, you got back on your horse.
Oh, yeah.
As far as drinking.
Yeah, I was ready.
So,
ready.
you know, tell us about the next few years.
So I decided that I needed to go back to school to become a nurse. I figured God saved me for a reason, and I could not for the life of me figure out what it was. But like a good alcoholic, I have the answers. So that was what I was going to do. And I can tell you, God's honest truth, I'm so grateful I went back to become a nurse. It is one of the greatest gifts I ever gave myself. And I helped a lot of people, and I'm grateful that I was able to do that. With a brain injury, I went back to school, and I did well. But I compartmentalized my drinking yet again, like I'd done in high school and college. And, you know, weekends are for blacking out, and weekdays are for study. But, you know, when I went to nursing school, I had to learn how to learn a whole different way. When I was younger and I was compartmentalizing, my brain hadn't been injured to the extent that it had been. And because I kept drinking the way I did, my brain didn't have an opportunity to heal either. So my short-term memory was poor, and I needed to learn a whole different way. I had to read things over and over again. I used flashcards. I had to memorize, and memorizing took me a lot of work, way different than it was when I was younger, before brain injury and before, you know, compounding the brain injury with alcohol. But I went to nursing school. I graduated. I went to work at Crozier for a while. I worked with some nurses that actually took care of me.
Really?
Some of the nurses that took care of me are actually still my friends on Facebook.
That's cool.
No way.
Yeah, and it's pretty. That's, you know, God gives us the most amazing gifts, because those people saved me, and they saved my family. I think the one thing that people forget about nurses, one thing that they forget about us as nurses, is that we're people. And another thing is that, you know, they're there to take care of your family too. And I saw what the good ones did, and I saw what the bad ones did. And the good ones made the most amazing difference to my family. And it wasn't just the nurses, the housekeeping staff. There was a woman on the housekeeping staff that brought us coffee every morning. And her name was Connie. And she made the biggest difference to my mom, because she was a mom, and she knew what it was like for my mom to sit there. And, you know, people don't realize every single person in that hospital is there because they care about you. And just because they're being a dick that day does not mean they're a dick.
Right.
It just means, you know what, you don't know what they did in the next room. And I learned that over years of being a nurse, that, you know, I would be in one room and code someone and they'd die. And I'd have to go next door and smile and ask you if you wanted some water. And it's a compartmentalizing job, which I am an excellent compartmentalizer, as we have learned from my years of alcoholism. But I graduated from nursing school. I was grateful that I got a job. I compartmentalized a lot in work, and then when I wasn't able to do it anymore, life got harder. I got a second DUI in June of 2009. I was a nurse for almost 3 years at that point, and I was pissed that they pulled me over. And I, you know, passed my sobriety test. They wouldn't let me take off my heels, so I was pretty angry at them for that, because I can't walk in heels.
So
Yeah, I know, so unfair. I was 30 wearing a leopard print tube top. I looked like a prostitute. Seriously, I looked like. I mean, I was a mess. I so wish that I had my mugshot to put on my wall, so I will never, ever wonder why I got sober. Ever. Not that I wonder it now, but you never know what comes up in life. But I was 30 wearing a leopard print tube top with these like heels that I had no business wearing, because I still can't walk in heels. Mascara running down my face. Telling the police officer, you can't arrest me because I'm a nurse. And he looked at me and looked at my blood alcohol, which was like a 0.28 at that point, and said, how are you walking a straight line right now? And I remember saying to him, why wouldn't I? And he said, do you think you have a problem? And of course, my alcoholic brain went, ooh, this is an out. So I started to cry, thinking he's going to let me go, right? Well, he did not let me go. And to this day, I'm grateful to him. It took me 6 months after that to realize I had a true problem with alcohol. I had to see if I could control my drinking. Controlled drinking lasted 2 weeks. I never, ever intended to stop. Ever. I was 30 years old. I lived at my parents' house. I had a good job. I spent every dime I had on alcohol. Every person I hung out with drank like I did, and that was okay with me. And I think at that point in my life, I never thought past 35. I just figured it is what it is. You know, this is life. And the 6 months before I got sober got so much worse. I remember saying to my mom when I was super hungover one day, she said, Christie, we can't keep doing this. You need to stop. You need to get help. And I said, you know what, Mom? Fuck the state of Pennsylvania if they think they can take my alcohol from me. Because they can't have it.
Nice.
They can have my nursing license, but they can't have that. And I was serious. And I meant it. And I remember my mom's face, and she said, "Oh my God, Christie, I don't know who you are." She said, "You are so sick." And I remember thinking, what does she mean? What do you mean I'm sick? You wouldn't want them to take it from you either. And this is the way my brain was working. I was angry. I was pissed.
It was logical, though.
Yes.
It made all the sense in the world in your brain.
Absolutely. So then it was coming up to court, and I knew I had to do something. And it was either 90 days in jail or get sober. And I still wasn't sure. And I had court in like 30 days. And it was just this random night. I went out, blacked out, drove in a blackout, came to in a blackout, saw a big tree and thought, if I just hit this thing right now, it's over. I'm done. And I can tell you the only reason I didn't. There's two reasons. My parents, because they already saw so much and never should see it again. And my niece was 3, my brother's daughter. She's 18 now. And I never wanted my niece to say, my Aunt Christie's dead now because she couldn't stop drinking. She chose to drink herself to death instead of be here for me. And I didn't hit the tree, obviously, thank God. And I got myself McDonald's, and I went home. And it was like 6 o'clock in the morning because I hadn't slept all night. And I called my mom at work that day and said, I need help. I need help. And she said, thank God, I've been praying. I've just been praying. And then we got on the phone and called the insurance company, called rehabs. And guess what I found out? I wasn't sick enough for rehab.
Really?
No.
What year was this?
2009.
Really?
Yeah.
That's strange.
Yeah. Fail outpatient once or twice, and we'll get you in.
Wow.
So I told the lady where to go on the phone, and I used a lot of not nice words. And I said, I am an intensive care nurse. I can't even stop drinking, and you won't help me. Well, you have to fail outpatient once or twice, so we can't get you in.
Once or twice, she said?
That's actually not true. We all know that to be not true.
We do know that's not true.
But when you call the insurance company, they have one thing on their mind.
We don't
Save
wanna
money.
pay. Yep, we don't wanna
Save
pay.
money. If you would have called a treatment center, let's
We did.
say, normally they would have been able to work it out to where...
Not great insurance.
Okay. So your insurance wasn't
My insurance
great.
wasn't great.
I got you.
Which, unfortunately, your insurance does determine if you're going to live or die sometimes.
Yes, it does.
2009 was pre... Obama brought in a ton of clauses with insurance companies that they had to cover treatment. And I think that was more like 2011,
They actually don't
2012.
have to cover treatment anymore.
Oh, no, I know they don't. But when he was driving this heavily, which I think was 2011, like 2013, the SJ3 in New Jersey mandated 30 days of treatment.
So
Act 106 here in Pennsylvania mandated 35 days of treatment.
Every insurance company, I work on the back end now, so I know they have loopholes, and they are able to get around it no matter what. So even then, they could get around it. Even now, healthcare can get around it.
Yeah, the thing is, if the insurance company doesn't want to pay, they're just going to tell you flat out. Now you have to admit, knowing you may get a big bill. So people, there are ways around it for insurance, and it's not fair, it's not moral, but they don't really care about
Moral.
being morally right.
No, they care about the bottom dollar, not the human being.
Right.
But I'll tell you, it worked out in my favor. I went to rehab after work. I went in Havertown. There was a counselor. His name was Warren. I don't know his last name. And he called me out. And I hated him for it. And I loved him for it at the same time. In my intake, he told me I was full of shit. And that I was a really good bullshitter. And I could stop the bullshit with him. And no one ever had said that to me in my life. And I will tell you, I was the queen of bullshit. The queen. And I did not like being called out on it. But everything happened the way it was supposed to. I went to rehab after work 3 days a week and on Saturdays. So 4 days a week total. I worked full-time as a nurse. The State Board of Nursing, I self-disclosed to the State Board of Nursing. They put me in a program called PNAP. And I was able to maintain my license. I went into individual group counseling and started going to meetings.
So were there any hiccups after that, or did you that was it?
I got sober November 9th of 2009, and by the grace of God and AA, I have remained that way since.
Very good.
You know what I love so much? Is that Warren, your therapist at Rehab After Work, that's a very AA approach. To look at you and call you out. Therapists aren't supposed to do that. And a lot of times today, they don't. And to me, that is a beautiful thing of the past because a therapist did something very similar to me. He called me out. He called me a liar. He called me a cheat. He called me an alcoholic.
I had one of those too.
And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And now therapists can be so, I don't want to say.
Touchy. They can be touchy.
Yeah.
They're just scared to tell what I call the patient the truth.
Yeah. Well, they don't want to hurt their feelings. Look, I'm here because my feelings got me drunk. My feelings aren't the facts. I need fact. And before I went to see Warren, I actually saw another guy who had to do my court evaluation. His name's Mike. And he's been around a long time. And I know you know him. And he saw me for my court evaluation. And I don't know why I trusted this guy. I didn't trust anybody at that point.
Mike B?
Mike B.
He's a trustworthy guy.
Yes, he is. And he called me. He called me an alcoholic. And I looked at him and I was pissed. But I told him everything. I told him every single thing I'd done, everything I was ashamed of, everything that kept me up at night, everything. And he said, "So what's the common denominator in all of this?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "Alcohol." And I was like, "Okay, you want me to say I'm an alcoholic, Mike? I'm an alcoholic, okay? Now what the fuck am I supposed to do about it?" And he said, "Okay, now we're getting somewhere." And I went to IOP the next week. When I finally had a couple days sober, I went to an AA meeting. I went to the Malvern Center in Malvern, Pennsylvania. It was a Saturday night meeting. There was 2 meetings going on at that time. It was at 8:30 at night. And at 7:30 that night, I was at home crying because my life was over because I couldn't drink anymore. And everyone that was in my life no longer talked to me because I didn't drink. And it had been 1 week. Awesome, right? Had the best friends.
1 week.
Yes. And my mom came into the room and goes, "You need to get your ass out of this house and go to one of those meetings."
That's awesome.
I love that.
And I said, "Fine." And I was pissed. And I went to a beginner's meeting. And
Monday
there was like,
nighters.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then there was the beginners meeting, and then there was the grown-uppers meeting. And the beginners meeting was me and a bunch of teenage and 20-something boys. I was 30. And I thought I was like, hot and all that. I probably looked like shit. And it was the first place I ever felt like I belonged without anybody judging me. Ever.
Best place for you.
And I stayed outside and smoked cigarettes afterwards and met some women that were a lot younger than me that had time. And they invited me to a diner. And I went, even though I was scared to death. And I thought, all these sober people are fucking crazy.
And you loved it.
It was the best time I'd had, and I had been sober for 5 days. And it was definitely a change for me. I was around people that actually seemed to care about me. They seemed to care if I got well. They called me and checked on me. They gave me their numbers and they wanted to see me. And it was amazing. And you know what? I kept going. And I got a sponsor. And I got a temporary sponsor. And we just didn't click. And you know what? That happens, and that's okay.
Happens all the time.
But your first meeting, get somebody that you can call to check in. That's it. That's what we got to do.
Yep.
And I did. And I was going to jail anyway. I had to do 2 weeks. And I had 90 days sober when I went to jail. And I went to a meeting the night before I went to jail. And I met a woman who had been through almost the exact same stuff as me. Not the accident, but DUIs and, license, worked in healthcare, all that. And she's got to go potty. Come here, Meg. So she offered to help me. She gave me her number. And she wrote to me in jail. Her sister wrote to me in jail. her sponsor wrote to me in jail. And she called my mom every day. And she emailed my mom and checked in on my mom and said she's going to be okay. And I can tell you, I was taken out of court in shackles in front of my mother, and I felt at peace. I knew I'd done it. And when I got to jail, I wasn't scared. God was with me. I wasn't alone. And since I was on antidepressants, I had to go to the in like the actual O block. I went to the O block of Chester County Prison, and just to make sure you're not super crazy, they keep you there. And then I got to go to work release where nobody works, which was interesting. And everybody was there for pretty much DUIs, drugs, and they brought in an AA meeting. And I remember this so clearly because I was shocked nobody else wanted to go to the meeting that night. And it was because American Idol was on.
Of course.
And this was 2010. So American Idol was like the thing. And I went. And there was 2 women that brought in the meeting and me. And they gave me a big book. And I read that thing from cover to cover in 2 days. And I don't know what I retained, but I can tell you the stories are what I retained. And the one story that I retained the most was called, I think, A Student of Life, I think it's called. Something like that. It's about a young woman and her getting sober. And the thing about it was, she said, you know, when I got sober, I didn't want to talk about, when I got sober, I wanted to tell everybody all the things I hadn't lost. But I hadn't gained anything. I had nothing to show for my life. And that story, I've read at meetings over the years. It just touched me. It made me realize we're all humans. We're all going to screw up. But look, she feels the same way. And I don't know when this story was written. I read Dr. Bill's story, or Dr. Bob's story, and Bill W.'s story. And they resonate with me. These men got sober in the 30s. And they resonate with me because we all had those feelings. It was the feelings, the isms, all these alcoholic feelings that feel like shit that nobody else gets.
I always like the reference of Jim's story with the sandwich. And the salesman, when he keeps thinking if he eats more sandwiches, then he'll be able to handle more whiskey. I had that same logic all the time. Just eat more sandwiches, you'll be fine. Like that's what it always was.
That was what got me. I'm like, did you vomit, Jim? Did you vomit?
Right.
Disgusting.
The one that got me was the jaywalker because I understood it. But when I first heard the story, I didn't. I said, oh, that makes no sense. And I think about 6 months in, I got it. I just got it. You know,
tell the crowd what the jaywalker was about.
All right. So the jaywalker walks in front of a trolley car, just keeps on doing it. Breaks an arm, goes to the hospital, does it again, breaks a leg, goes to the hospital, just keeps on walking in front of the trolley cars, walks in front of a bus. I mean, he just keeps on doing it. And I got it. I got it because it was like, you know what? It makes so much sense because I needed it. I needed alcohol because I needed it to function. I needed it to be a normal person. And I needed it to have fun. And I needed it to go out to dinner. And I needed it to relax after work. And I'm a nurse and I had a rough shift, so I need to get drunk, and I work night shift, so I need to go to the bar at 7:30 in the morning, and you would too if you had my life. And then at 6 months sober, something just clicked, and I realized, wow, you know what? I don't want it anymore. I don't want it. So yeah, 6 months sober, I remember driving in the car with my mom because I didn't have a driver's license for 2.5 years. And I had the breathalyzer in my car afterwards, all that fun stuff. And I remember it being beautiful out. And I said, you know, this is the first day I haven't craved a drink.
How long did you have in the program?
About 6 months.
That you didn't crave anything?
Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that I physically craved it. It was that my brain kept telling me you needed it.
It's time. It's time to drink.
Yeah.
Right.
Where
it's
have
raining.
you been?
One day that stops.
Right. Yeah. It's raining. It's sunny. It's Wednesday, you know. And I just thought, wow, you know what? I can do this. And I've managed it one day at a time. And it's just been a long time. And when I look back now and I realize, when I say how much time I have now, 14 and a half years of continual sobriety, I look at myself and think, damn, Christie. And how in the world could a girl like you that wanted to die without alcohol be here now and be a mother and be a friend and be a daughter and be a nurse and be able to do all these things that honestly I never thought I could do. I never thought I was going to be able to be a mom, let alone doing it by myself, you know. I went through divorce sober. I got married sober. I got divorced sober. And it's not easy to go through any of that. Weddings are stressful. Divorce is stressful. Babies are stressful. Honestly, I miscarried when I was 6 years sober. And that was the closest I ever came to picking up a drink.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. It was hard. And it was painful. And I was sad. And that was I was in so much pain inside that was the only thing I could think of that was going to take it away. So instead I went to a meeting and I cried and I shared. And I can tell you the carpets of AA meetings have more tears of people than they will ever be able to say. But I went there and I shared it and I didn't pick up a drink that day. And I know where I can go when I hurt. And I know where I can go when I'm happy. And I know where I can go when things are great and when things are shit and just when it's a regular day. Because, the disease won't go away. It just grows. Like Warren, like I said, from Rehab After Work used to tell us, while you're in here or while you're in a meeting, your disease is in the parking lot doing push-ups because you have a disease that wants to kill you. We don't have an explanation for why this disease wants to kill you, but it does. Its only goal is for you to die.
And how old were you when you had your first day of sobriety? Do you remember how old?
30.
You were 30.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I was 30 years old.
So there's a lot of people that wonder, and I wondered this too, because I was about 6 weeks before I turned 21 when I went into treatment.
Were a baby.
Yeah. So the one thing that I asked my therapist, I said, I was like a thinker. Mm-hmm. Like, oh my God, he's telling me I could, somebody told me I could never drink again. I'm 20. I may live to be 80, 85. How am I going to go 65 more years without drinking? Mm-hmm. And he says, I don't care if you drink tomorrow. Just don't drink today. Mm-hmm. So, and if you take it one day at a time, it's so much easier. Again, sometimes you have to take it an hour at a time. But even being 30, you have a long life in front of you. Mm-hmm. You can't look at it like you're going to be alcohol free forever. Mm-hmm. So and a buddy of mine reminded me last week, he actually texted me. He said, although you've been sober for many years, you really only have today. And that was such a strong message for me because I have 37 plus years. Mm-hmm. And, alcohol, like Sam said, it's waiting in the parking lot, or like you said, waiting in the parking lot doing push-ups for me to screw up.
Mm-hmm. When I didn't, I remember saying, so you mean I can never drink again? I never. And when they told me take it one day at a time, you know what? I took that pretty seriously because it was the only way I could figure out how to do this.
I had such a hard time with that for so long. They were like, don't worry about when you're 40 or however old you're concerned about at this moment in time. Just worry about today. I thought it was the most ridiculous concept in the world. It annoyed me. Like I was like, I'm worried about next week. I'm worried about tomorrow. Mm-hmm. I need to make money. I need to pay my bills.
Yep.
You guys are all worried about today? That's stupid. And they're like, well, what have you done today? All you've done is worry about what's coming down the line. You have no gratitude and you've accomplished absolutely nothing. Mm-hmm. So I kind of started to just live my life to the fullest a day at a time. Within the confines of AA, whether that be getting in service in some capacity. And I inherently that's how I found God. That's literally how I found God, was living by the mantra, take it one day at a time. It all started to kind of click into place with me because of that.
Taking it one day at a time for me, in the beginning was too long. I needed, like Vinny said, sometimes an hour, sometimes 5 minutes. Because I love to project and I love to look in the future. And I remember before I got sober, I'd be like, ugh, well, if I don't drink when I get married, then I won't have fun. And if I don't drink when I do this, but also the way I drank prevented me from doing a lot of things because I didn't travel because I blacked out and I was scared to death to black out in a city that I didn't know. I was scared to death to go to Europe and black out because I'll die. And honestly, yeah, I would have died. And maybe I wouldn't have. Who knows where I'd be? But, one day at a time kept it simple for me, and I really needed to keep my sobriety central and simple because I can complicate the shit out of anything. And I think that's just the way alcoholics tend to do it. We're like, I can certainly complicate this for you. You might make it simple. I can mess this up. And I needed to learn that. And I had a really good sponsor in the beginning, and she helped me a lot. And I did almost none of this perfect. I did the steps slower than some do. My personal belief is, and this was what I got from Warren as well and rehab after work. 1, 2, 3 waltz. He said the 1, 2, 3 waltz is what you're going to do for your entire first year. Because you love to do things fast. You need to do them right. Not fast, but right. And I didn't get that at first. And I wanted to just go. And I was like, I'm going to get the AA books, and I'm going to get the covers, and I'm going to get the journals, and I'm going to get all the pretty accessories, and I'm going to do the perfect AA girl.
You wanted to win.
Yeah.
Yeah. You wanted to win.
I wanted to be it all.
Unfortunately, you never get to win in AA.
No, you don't. And that's okay now.
Totally.
But it took a really long time.
Definitely.
I wanted to be this be all end all poster girl for AA, and then I was like, oh, this anonymity shit. I don't like it.
So you're saying you worked on the first 3 steps for a year?
Yep. I worked on the first 3 steps for an entire year.
Good
when
for
I
you.
had 1 year, I did my 4th. When I had a little over a year, I did my 5th. When I had 1 year sober, I bought my first house. And I saved money.
That's an accomplishment.
It was enormous. And, I grew up in AA. I was a kid, I was a child when I came in. And now I'm a grown woman with kids that know that mommy has a disease called alcoholism, that mommy has an allergy to alcohol, and that people like mommy can't drink alcohol. Their dad is also in recovery, and they know that alcohol is not something that we can have. But like my mom can drink like a normal person. So my mom will have a drink and they'll be like, Mama, that's poison, right?
Good for her.
And my mom was like, what? And I was like, Maggie, remember how we talked about how some people can have a drink? Mom can have one. Mommy can't have one. Mommy can't stop.
Right.
And she said, that's why you're allergic. And I said, that's right. Mommy reacts differently to something that other people can have. And they know, my babies went to meetings. I fed them bottles at meetings. Women carried them and rocked them. I went through postpartum depression in meetings. I went through divorce in meetings. And you know what? Here I still am. And I'm still sober. And my kids have never, ever had to see their mother pick up a drink.
That's a great feeling, knowing that your children have never seen you impaired.
Yeah, it's a miracle.
Yep.
For this alcoholic, that is a miracle. That my children know that alcohol is not part of my life. It is not going to be part of our lives. And I want them to have a healthy understanding of it. And I do tell them, my littlest, I think she was 4, and she's like, my mom's an alcoholic, to one of the neighbors. And they just kind of looked at her, and I said, I'm a sober alcoholic. I'm in recovery, but I also don't want that name or disease to carry shame for my kids.
Right.
This disease is not full of shame for me anymore. That is something I learned through God and AA. I don't carry shame. I don't carry guilt. I have a disease, and I'm taking care of it. And we don't need to be embarrassed. We don't need to be upset about it. We know what to do.
What a compelling story. What a great story you have. And I'm so happy that you are a part of our podcast. When we started putting things together, I thought of you almost right away because I knew you had a great story for other women and for other men too, And I just said, we got to have Christie on the show. And it was so much my pleasure to sit with you through this podcast. I really appreciate it. Sam, anything to close?
I feel like you and I have probably met before. It was just nice to see you again.
I think so too.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We appreciate you being on, and this is Tenacious Recovery. You have to be tenacious about your recovery so you can stay sober. Do the work because it'll always pay off for you. My friend here is Sam. My name is Vinny. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. And we'd love to thank Christie for being a part of this. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you down the road at some point. Tenacious Recovery, everybody. Spread the word.